On the surface, these two phones look almost exactly the same, but this is last year's Pixel 9, and this is the brand new Pixel 10. And by just looking at them, you might think the Pixel 10 is just a minor incremental refresh, but what you see is not 100% everything you need to know. Because underneath the typical glass and metal build, there are dozens of changes, some small, some absolutely massive, that completely separate these two devices. So today, we're going to do a little deep dive and go over every single major difference between the two so you can decide if this year's model is worth your time or if last year's model is a better buy. And yes, we are 100% addressing the elephant in the room about the camera situation. I did some additional testing and we're going to look at some more samples to decide if the downgrade in the Pixel 10's camera system is really that big of a deal or if everything is just overblown. So with that said, let's focus on the actual changes with the raw hardware first, and there are some small but noticeable changes. When it comes to the physical dimensions, the Pixel 10 does have a few changes as it's slightly thicker and heavier than the Pixel 9. The Pixel 9 measures at 152.8 by 72.0 by 8.5 millimeters thick and weighs in at around 199 grams, while the Pixel 10 measures in at that same 152.8 by 72 millimeters, but it's slightly thicker at 8.6 millimeters and weighs a little bit more at 204 grams. And the biggest reason for this most likely is to fit in the new Qi tube magnets built directly into the Pixel 10 series, which to me is a totally worthy trade-off for the ability to natively tap into the MagSafe market. Although, because of this change, and with the adjustment of a slightly thicker camera bar, last year's cases will not fit this year's phone, unlike we've been hoping for in some of our videos in the past. You can certainly try to force it on and no one's stopping you, but you are going to encounter issues where the Pixel 9's cases bulge or bubble up against the camera bar. Maybe with the more flexible silicone cases, you very well might be able to get away with it, but it really won't be a nice fit and is honestly not worth the risk, at least in my opinion, especially since the SIM card tray has been removed in place of a symmetrical speaker cutout that houses the microphone, so you'll probably impede your ability to use voice-related tasks, which of course isn't ideal. Speaking of the SIM card tray, if you are using a US model Pixel 10, that feature is gone altogether now as it is eSIM only, whereas in global markets you still do retain the SIM card tray at the top. One last physical change, Google did note improved audio quality for the Pixel 10, but it's only for the top speaker. In general, I would say audio does sound better. It's the tiniest bit richer when playing videos at the highest volume compared to the Pixel 9, but nothing really game-changing, just a slight improvement if you ask me. Talking about the displays real quick, there are a few on-paper improvements here. Both are still using the very similar 6.3-inch 120Hz 1080 by 2024 OLED displays covered with Gorilla Glass Victus 2, but there is a small brightness boost as the base Pixel 10 can now reach 3000 nits peak as opposed to 2700 on the Pixel 9, which, hey, I can never get enough brightness, especially outdoors, so it's a nice bonus there. The internals are another area where we have a few changes as well. Of course, we have the Tensor G5 in the Pixel 10, which is now built on a 3nm process from the Tensor G4's 4nm process. On paper, it has a 60% more powerful TPU, which is responsible for machine learning tasks and AI workloads, and it does run Gemini Nano 2.6 times faster for certain tasks, while also having a 34% on average faster CPU. Because of those changes, it allows the Pixel 10 to run the latest Gemini Nano models, which in turn can enable more on-device generative AI experiences like Magic Q, Live Voice Translate, Call Notes, Pixel Journal, and a ton more. I would say it's safe to assume anything that currently runs on-device today will probably take a long time to be backported to older Pixel models, if at all. So if any of the on-device AI features look intriguing to you now, upgrading today will get you that experience as soon as possible. And of course, I think it's safe to assume Google will be trying to get as much out of the Tensor G5 as possible from here on out, so future features that come in feature drops could very likely be Pixel 10 exclusive just due to the on-device nature of the Tensor G5. Probably the only issue that I've seen with the G5 in these early days is graphical performance, as Google switched the GPU architecture from the ARM Mali G715 to a PowerVR DXT 48-1536, which does have some interesting implications. Our friends over at Android Authority ran a series of benchmarks, and I will link their work in the description. Long story short, they concluded there is a noticeable performance uplift at the start of gaming, but it apparently heats up much faster than the previous Tensor G4, at least on the GPU side, which causes performance to drop down to the same level as the Tensor G4 after only a few minutes of demanding gameplay. And also, there is no ray tracing support, unlike last year's Tensor G4, so as a whole, the Tensor G5 is definitely faster in day-to-day performance in AI tasks, which is Google's main focus, but it's still far behind the competitors when it comes to gaming specifically. Personally, I'm not too worried about gaming performance, as I really don't enjoy gaming on my phone anyways. I have my OnePlus Pad 3, my Nintendo Switch, or my gaming PC for that specific function, but I can imagine those that did want to do some gaming on this chip are a little bit disappointed. Another slight disappointment is with this whole internal storage situation as well. The Pixel 10 does use the much faster UFS 4.0 standard of storage, which is almost double the speed of UFS 3.1 speeds found in the Pixel 9, but it's only available on the 256 gig models and above. So if you buy the 128 gigabyte Pixel 10, you literally cannot enjoy this technological upgrade. Apparently, 128 gigabyte chips don't even exist for UFS 4.0 storage, so to me, I kind of feel like it begs the question, why even offer 128 gigabytes at all? I think the answer to that, unfortunately, is the everyday consumer probably won't notice all that much, while the more technically minded people will probably notice it a bit more. Regardless, it is a bummer to say the least. And as I'm sure you've heard a million times now, the Pixel 10 does have built-in magnets that support Qi 2 chargers and MagSafe accessories, which of course the Pixel 9 does not have. You can work around this to a degree by grabbing a third-party case with the magnets built in, and you'll largely be able to replicate that experience, but it is something worth keeping in mind. For charging and battery, there are a few interesting changes here as well. On the Pixel 10, you'll be able to charge up to 55% in 30 minutes with a 30-watt charger, while the Pixel 9 can get up to 55% in 30 minutes as well, but that's with a more powerful 45-watt charger. So the Pixel 10 is slightly more efficient in that regard. It is also worth noting the Pixel 10 has a slightly bigger battery, rated at 4970 milliamp hours, which should get you around 30 hours of battery life according to Google, while the Pixel 9 has a smaller 4700 milliamp hour battery, rated at 24 hours of battery life. Finally, we're back to talking about the cameras, and this is where the story does get really interesting. In my initial Pixel 10 impression, I was critical of the low light performance, and I got a lot of feedback, especially from Redditors, saying that my lens was smudged, which is why I got so much glare on my photos. So for this comparison, I took a few dozen new images, making sure that both lenses were crystal clear for every photo. I carried around a microfiber cloth just to be sure of it, and here are my definitive findings. As we talked about in my impressions video, in ideal daylight scenarios, the main cameras on the Pixel 9 and Pixel 10 produce photos that are, on the whole, on par with each other. The processing is a little bit different, like how the Pixel 10 is a bit more contrasty and vibrant, but largely you are getting the same great looking photos regardless. However, if you zoom in and really start to pixel peep, you can clearly see the differences. Simply put, the Pixel 9's superior sensor just retains so much more fine detail and produces a clearly sharper image when you look super closely. That difference does become way more pronounced in low light. While I think it's fair to say my original photos may have exaggerated the glare just due to the lighting conditions, after the reshoots my conclusion largely stays the same. On average, the Pixel 9 consistently produces sharper low light photos and retains more fine detail in textures and the general environment. The Pixel 10 is in fact much more prone to glare, as I mentioned in my initial impressions, creating a soft, hazy bloom around light sources like streetlights and signs, for example. In general, actually, the Pixel 10's low light images are noticeably softer than the Pixel 9's as well, with more noise chipping away at a lot of detail that the Pixel 9 otherwise has currently, and ultimately, the Pixel 9 has way better light control, maintaining deep, true blacks in nighttime environments. So to be clear, it is very well possible my lens was smudged, exaggerating these issues in my initial impressions, although I really don't think that was the case. Regardless, based on these reshoots, my answer is still exactly the same. Even though it wasn't a point of contention, I still have similar views on the new telephoto lens. Comparing the Pixel 10's 5x telephoto against the Pixel 9's purely digital zoom, it's really no contest. The Pixel 10 does produce significantly clearer, sharper results. It's a massive upgrade in versatility and a fantastic tool to have in your toolkit if you ever find yourself shooting from a distance. Pretty much anything that comes from this lens compared to the Pixel 9 are super sharp, super clean, and are actually usable to a great degree. Even better is the 20x super res zoom featured on the Pixel 10 as well. It uses AI to assist in generating a complete image taken at a distance. In my testing, it isn't always perfect. If the camera can't at least make out what an object is, it will try its best, which sometimes results in blurry AI gobbledygook depending on the subject. But if the camera can realistically tell what an object is, it does a fairly good job at filling in the blanks. So in total, is that huge upgrade in zoom worth the trade-offs on the main sensor? As I said in my previous video, that is ultimately up to you. If you value that zoom capability, you'll probably be very happy with the base Pixel 10, as the telephoto lens is great and the main lenses are good enough for general usage. But if you're the kind of person that wants to squeeze every possible pixel they can out of the main lenses, consider the Pixel 10 Pro, the Pixel 9 Pro, or the base Pixel 9 on sale. With all of that said, we do need to keep in mind the Pixel 9 is about to get some massive sales, especially with the release of the Pixel 10 series. And a big question for you guys is this: are the Pixel 10's massive upgrades in zoom, the addition of MagSafe capability, the faster and arguably future-proof performance, at least for Google's AI ambitions, the bigger battery, the suite of new AI features, and much more, worth the price difference over a discounted Pixel 9 that on paper has a slightly better main camera sensor? For my money, it's kind of hard to say. I'm genuinely into AI, so for my needs, I would grab a Pixel 10 Pro. That way I can use every single feature possible. But if I didn't care about AI at all, it seems like a discounted Pixel 9 device seems like a really good deal right now. So with all that said, I'll leave it up to you guys now. What are your thoughts on this whole Pixel 9 versus Pixel 10 situation? After all the information here, which one are you considering, if at all? Leave a comment and let me know your thoughts, as I'm super curious to hear what the Android community is thinking. Until next time, this has been Jordan Floyd with 9to5 Google. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.